What is going on, guys? Welcome to The Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the scriptures. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be doing a book review of Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane. Now, before we dive into the review, let's first go over what is this book about. The year is 1954. U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels and his new partner, Chuck All, have come to Shutter Island, home of Ashcliff Hospital for the Criminally Insane, to investigate the disappearance of a patient. Multiple murderess Rachel Solando is loose somewhere on this remote and barren island, despite having been kept in a locked cell under constant surveillance. As a killer hurricane relentlessly bears down on them, a strange case takes on even darker, more sinister shades, with hints of radical experimentation, horrifying surgeries, and lethal countermoves made in the cause of a covert shadow war. No one is going to escape Shutter Island unscathed, because nothing at Ashcliff Hospital is what it seems. But then, neither is Teddy Daniels. Okay, guys, so if you're new to the channel, the way that I normally structure my reviews is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good being the things about the book that I enjoyed, the bad being things that I didn't care so much for, and these are preferential things, maybe a character I didn't like, maybe the writing style or the setting, something like that, maybe even the length of the book. But then I go into the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped into this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up, and I break this down into 5 categories. But before we get into that, let's first go over the good. So what did I like about this book? Quite a bit. So I will just save you a bunch of time. If you're looking for whether or not I like the book or not, the answer is yes. If you like the movie, you'll like the book. I would even say if you like the movie, you'll love the book. I certainly think the book is much better. The pacing makes more sense. A lot of it in the book makes more sense to me than it did with the movie. Not in like a confusing way, but I just think it was more cohesive. So what did I like? Obviously your characters, your main character, Teddy Daniels, very intriguing character, memorable character, one that I think will live on for quite some time, obviously, since this book is probably 30 years old, if not older. But I really enjoyed the character of Teddy. I enjoyed that we mainly focused on him, we weren't necessarily learning about the story of him investigating this, but it was really more of a story about Teddy. I guess you could argue that it was a bit of both, but I wouldn't say that it was equal. I certainly think that we were following along with the investigation, but really you wanted to learn more and more about Teddy and his backstory. And then the setting of Shutter Island itself was fantastic. It was top notch. But I would say one of my favorite things about this book is the pacing and the writing style. This is a very readable book. Now that might sound like a silly thing to say, but for those of you who have read some books that aren't the most reader friendly, then you understand what I'm saying, because this book was very easy for me to pick up and kind of take off with it. I didn't have to spend too much time with the prose or trying to, really dive into nuance of things. But also, Dennis Lehane doesn't hold your hand. He's not going to hold your hand and walk you through absolutely everything. He's going to let you kind of figure some of it out on your own. And I appreciate that. It's him understanding that his audience isn't stupid. And I thoroughly appreciate that. But yeah, it's very readable. It's easy to pick it up and set it back down, because for me, most of the time when I'm reading a book, and probably for the vast majority of people who read, they like to stop at the end of a chapter or, right before they begin a new one. This book, I found I could sort of just put a pin wherever it was that I was reading, put it down and pick it back up. And this made it a lot easier for me to find time to read it, because ordinarily when I'm reading a book, I want to be able to start a chapter and complete a chapter before I move to get up and go do something. But with this book, I found that I could just open it up and read a few pages and stop and come back to it without skipping a beat. I think that's kind of a rare thing when it comes to a lot of the different books that we read. I certainly know for a lot of epic fantasy books, it is not the norm for me to be able to just sort of put a bookmark there and come back without me going, whoa, wait, what's going on? Because with this book, it is so easy to just jump right back in. It felt more like I pressed pause on the remote and then was able to hit play without forgetting even the most minute detail. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think this is a very readable book. I also enjoyed the tone. He was able to keep this ominous, noir, almost destitute type of tone throughout the entire book. I'm not saying that the book was entirely hopeless or anything like that, but it was certainly dour. And while that might sound silly, it just was kind of the glue that held everything together. So what did I like about this book? Pretty much everything. I really don't think there was anything in here that I disliked. I think I gave this a 10 out of 10, 5 stars on Goodreads. Thoroughly enjoyed it. So now let's talk about the bad. So what were some things in this book that I didn't enjoy? And I'm pleased to announce that there really isn't anything. There was a couple of times where if you've seen the movie and you know the twist, or if you've read the book and you know the twist, and I'm not going to give anything away, there were a couple of things that a few side characters did that I don't think were consistent with the narrative by the end of it. There was a couple of things with a guard in particular where he made some choices fully knowing what he was doing, and it didn't really make a whole lot of sense for me personally. I was like, okay, why would they do that? If you read the book, I think you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, just disregard what I'm saying. But otherwise, I didn't see anything. I thought everything was really blended together perfectly. It was an excellent conglomeration of ideas, and it was beautifully executed and articulated. So this brings me to the ugly, which is what could be some sin that is steeped in this work that might hold a Christian back from picking it up. And I break this down into 5 categories and rate them out of 10, starting with violence and brutality. Now for violence and brutality, I'm going to give this a 3. It's not very violent. It's not very brutal. There are some things that take place when the hurricane comes through and it knocks the power out. It lets some of these, we'll call them patients, let some of them loose, and they're running a little rampant throughout the island. They're having to regain control. I guess that's the nicest way to put it. And there's a couple of times where some fights broke out. It wasn't really anything super brutal or super violent. There are a few things in some of the flashbacks that could be considered pretty violent and brutal. One in particular, and I don't want to give it away because it does have a lot to do with the ending. That is pretty violent and brutal, but I actually want to place that in a separate category at the end. So for violence and brutality, just as far as like on-screen violence and on-screen brutality, I'm going to give it a 3. There's not a whole lot in here. You're reading this to find out Teddy's story and to learn more about this investigation. So category 2 is going to be sexually explicit content. Now for sexually explicit content, I'm going to give this a 2. Yeah, not really in here either. There's some mentions of things, because this is a co-ed hospital for the criminally insane. So there's a few passing mentions of some like relations that have taken place and things, but it's not explicit. There's never any on page or on screen intimacy. It's nothing like that. There were a few mentions of some like impropriety, but otherwise I would say it's not really in here. So category 3 is going to be language. Now for language, I'm going to give this a 6. And the reason I give it a 6 is because there are a few heavy hitters in here. They're sprinkled throughout the book. I think they're few and far between, but for the vast majority of the book, I'm going to say it's probably like a 2, but at its peak, you're looking at probably around a 6. So I just want to err on the side of caution for people who are overly sensitive to profane language. And by overly sensitive, I don't mean too sensitive, because I don't really know if there's such a thing. It's a subjective thing, but I do know that there are people out there where the language has more of an effect on them than it does with me. And so for you all, I would say this is about a 6. So just kind of go into it knowing that you are going to encounter some heavy language at times. But like I said, for the vast majority of the book, I don't think it's in here. Category 4 is going to be gratuitous inclusions. Now for gratuitous inclusions, for those of you that don't know, these are things that are kind of shoehorned in here for an agenda or maybe to proselytize some sort of religious or political agenda in order to try to convince the reader, or in order to try to discredit scripture, those kind of things. Or it could be, somebody pulling a race card or something like that. For me personally, in this book, I'm going to give it an absolute 0. There are a few things where race has been mentioned, but you're dealing in the 50s. So I just would say that it's accurate. I wouldn't say that it is good or bad. I would just say it's accurate. There's one character in particular that threw around a couple of slurs. It's only in one scene that's a few sentences long, but if you have a big problem with that, maybe this isn't for you. But I would just say it's realistic for the 50s and for this certain individual. But I wouldn't say that it's gratuitous in nature. That's why I'm going to give it a 0. And the final category is dark themes. Now for dark themes, I'm going to give this a 7. I can't go into much detail for those of you who haven't seen the movie or read the book. But what I'll tell you is that there are some very heavy things in this book that by the end of the book, the revelations that are made, you understand that some horrible things took place. And well, I just have to kind of reel that in because I don't want to give anything away. There's some very weighty things that took place that could cause you to lose sleep or could cause you to maybe have some nightmares I just would say it's not something that I would want to dwell on, which is part of the reason why when I went to watch the movie after I read it, I didn't really want to watch the movie because I didn't want to see that. Again, not because it's like gratuitous or like too heavy for my conscience. It's just, I just don't want to see it. And so, yeah, by the end of the book, there's some very weighty things, I wouldn't say it's anything spiritual in nature. So for dark themes, I'm going to say it's really more for the heavy themes. But for the heavy themes, they're pretty heavy. So I'm going to put them in about a 7. Overall, the book I would give an R rating. And I would give it an R rating for its tone, for those heavy themes, and for the language. I would say it's like just a toe over the line from PG-13, probably because of the language and some of the heavier things that take place. But I think the movie might be PG-13. I'm not sure, but I would say it probably, if you watch the movie and you are fine with it, then I don't think you'll have a problem with the book. So this brings me to the final category, which is, would I recommend this to a Christian? And the answer is, yes, I would, but it depends on the individual. I know I say this all the time. Say it with me. It depends, right? I say it all the time, but it really does depend on the individual. This is not going to be a book for everybody. I would say Dennis Lehane is probably not going to be an author for everybody. So just kind of set your expectations before you go into the book. If you've seen, I would say his 3 most famous movie adaptations are Shutter Island, Gone Baby Gone, and Mystic River. And so if you've seen those movies, you know all of those have a similar tone. If you're okay with that, I think you'll have a great time reading this book. If that's too heavy for you, I would say probably skip it. But for anyone who's looking for a very intriguing mystery and thriller novel with, in my opinion, a better twist than 90% of M. Night Shyamalan's, then I certainly think that you should pick this up. I think for anybody that liked the movie or maybe even loved the movie, I really think that you should pick this up because I think it is far superior to the film itself. So would I recommend this to a Christian? I certainly would, but it's going to depend on that individual. It's going to depend on their reading tastes. I wouldn't recommend this to my wife just because I know her reading tastes. I know that she prefers like romance novels, and you're not going to get that with this book. So it's just going to depend on you. I would say for any of you who have been thinking about trying Dennis Lehane, this is a great place to start. It really is a great book. It's certainly in the running so far for Book of the Year for me. It's really, really good. I had an excellent time with it, and it's not really long, so you don't have to invest a ton of time in it. But would I recommend it to a Christian? Yes. It's just going to depend on you and your reading tastes. So overall, guys, I absolutely love Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane. I plan on picking up more of Lehane's work this year. I know most of his novels are standalones. I know he does have one sort of long series, but they're all sort of that mystery thriller sort of crime novel. I love those. Those are great palate cleanses. So I plan to sprinkle those in throughout the year moving forward this year. I want to get into more of Lehane's work. So this has really whetted my appetite to get into more of his novels because they're very well written. They are perfectly paced and the characters are memorable, but they're also kind of short. So For me, I think it's like the perfect recipe for a palate cleanse. So I had a great time with it. So guys, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me and listening to me ramble about Shutter Island for a little bit. Guys, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It does help, but more than anything, guys, if you would, please share these videos with your Christian brothers and sisters who love to read, because it is my goal with this channel to be a good resource for my other brothers and sisters in Christ, so that maybe we can spend our time, money, and energy a little more wisely on things that honor the Lord. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.
Perfekt den Schlag.